I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, imagine someone you love, someone you are married to, is killed tragically, wrongfully, and you file a lawsuit, a wrongful death lawsuit. Your loved one, your husband in this case, has been killed by a police officer. You're pressured to settle. You're offered $1 million. Well, that's what happened to Linda Lee King. She was offered $1 million to make it all go away quietly with an undisclosed resolution to the problem. Instead, she said, no, I'm going to have my day in court and I'm going to fight for the truth. And that is the theme of her book. It is called Sticks and Stones and Broken Bones, What a Charmed Life I Lead by Linda Lee King. And we are delighted to have Linda here today on Spotlight. Linda, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for asking.
My pleasure. Quite a book you've written. Let's tell the audience a little bit about 1974 and what happened to your husband.
Okay, I was in love. I thought my whole world was finally going to evolve into the kind of life I wanted. You know, the family, grow with my husband. We had no clue what was in store for our future. You know, we were just taking it on the cuff like most young couples do. You have a sort of a plan, but not a real plan. But you support each other. You support each other's dreams and things like that. And we were on that cusp. Well, on July 16th, at about approximately 1:15 in the morning, I wake up because I can hear sirens. I hear these sirens going off, and I'm wondering, Tommy's not home yet. And I just immediately became concerned. Next thing I know, I can see the sirens, the lights right on the bank across the street coming across. There was a canal there. So right there on the bank, I'm seeing all these lights, and all of a sudden they stop in front of the house, and I hear gunfire. That's the first thing I hear is gunfire. I jump out of bed, but by the time I got out of bed, I'm not in clothes, okay? I'm naked. I'm a pregnant, 9-month pregnant woman. I'm sleeping. I'm naked. I go to turn the light on. And as I turn the light on, my husband is running right into the bedroom. And he's just the look on his face. I've never seen him afraid before. Okay. There was genuine fear. And then these two officers come slashing, running through the bedroom. Now, let me pause for a moment because sure. I regress when these things happen. When I'm telling the story. It's an incredible story,
but and I know it takes a lot to tell it, even decades after the fact. So we appreciate it. But your husband comes rushing into the house?
He comes rushing in through the front door, and I see one officer run behind him. Okay. And he actually was the officer that was in charge. The other one was the patrol officer. He's got the weapon out. I see this gun, and I'm paralyzed almost, okay? And all I'm saying is, what's going on? Tommy, Tommy, Tommy. I'm calling the man's name. Now, if that's a stranger, you wouldn't know who his name is, right?
Right.
So this is obvious that I know him, but it didn't stop the cop from shooting him. He kept saying, hold it right there, buddy. Hold it right there. My husband wasn't moving. He had his hands up in the air, right above his head. Cop lied. I could see the flames exit that barrel. I saw flames coming out of that weapon. And my husband drops to the ground, and I'm mortified. And then all he yells at me, telling me, get dressed. And I realized I'm naked. I didn't even realize I was naked. Okay.
Right.
And my husband's lying there, and he squirmed on his back from the bedroom down to the hallway. He was in that much pain. He was squirming. I'm trying to, don't move. Don't move. I didn't know what to do. I run to the bathroom, and I get a sponge to get his lips moistened, because all I knew is that you're not supposed to drink fluids or anything like that if you've been shot.
Right.
So I was just dampening, and he just kept saying, go get dressed, go get dressed. And the other cop went into my son's bedroom and he's holding my child. And I freaked. He had my son in his hands and I grabbing my son. I go get dressed. But what really pissed me off, okay, maybe I better watch my mouth.
No, that's okay.
Was the fact that he kept lying for over 8 years before we went to court. He was reaching for the gun. Well, the autopsy proved what I said was the truth. Because if he had been reaching for the weapon, there would have been powder burns all up and down his hands. There was barely traces of it at his fingertips while his hands are in the air.
Right.
So that always stays in my mind. I try to push it out. I try to even forget all these people who they are.
Right.
But I can't.
Right. Yeah, because it's such a horrible chapter of your life. In many ways, you'd like to forget all about it. But like you said, it's burned, it's seared into your memory. It's impossible to forget. Now, why were the police officers pursuing your husband that night?
Oh, quote unquote, heavy acceleration from a stop sign. Yeah.
Crazy.
And 2 weeks prior to that, all right, you got to know a little background. Well, you probably remember this, but when he was a teenager, he was the cat burglar of Grosse Pointe. Okay. He was 16, 17 years old. His mother was in an institution then. She was a schizophrenic.
Right.
His father had his own business and he worked all day long and he never got home in time. So the two kids were basically left on their own. And he got into trouble. He was bored. He, all these things that teenagers do when they're 16, stupid stuff.
Right.
Well, he was actually dubbed the cat burglar.
Wow.
They never caught him on that. One day they caught him with a TV, but they couldn't prove anything else.
Right.
They couldn't prove it. So it was more of a vengeful thing. It was revenge because 2 weeks prior to the shooting, cop pulls up to my husband while he's driving and says, "We're going to get you." That's what they said to him. We told an attorney friend of ours about that incident. And also the neighbors that lived to us said that when we moved in, they were approached by the Grosse Pointe Police Department because they wanted to spy on my husband.
Right.
They wanted to spy on him.
Right. Yeah, these small town cops hold grudges. They don't forget. If they feel like they've been made to look foolish, they're going to get you one way or another. People have actually had to leave towns because these officers hold grudges against them.
I left town too.
Hassle them every time they drive down the street.
Yep. I would drive before I left Michigan to go to Florida. Mm-hmm. I could drive down one road. Okay. I'd drive down the street, Grosse Pointe, I'm driving, There's a cop car following me.
Right.
There were cop cars parked in front of my house for months. This was going on.
Right.
And I would make a right turn. Well, son of a gun, right. I had to watch my mouth. There'd be a cop car there to basically pick up where the other one left off.
Right.
I would make another turn. There was another cop car. I finally called the attorney that my father-in-law got a hold of, and I told him what was going on. I said, "This is real. This is happening." Right. And after he did whatever he did, they stopped. They stopped doing that. But I was also told, you should leave town. I was told to leave town if I was to be safe. It was the days when you knew your phone was tapped. You could hear that clickety click.
Yep.
Oh, that went on numerous times. And for quite a few years, I just didn't have a telephone.
Right.
Didn't want anybody to find me. Didn't want my kids to get killed. Me, whatever. But it was rough because I had to live 8 years under that umbrella of being a widow.
Right. And
because no matter if I tried to move on, there was always something there to say, no, you can't.
Exactly. Exactly. It took years for you to finally get justice. Tell me what that ordeal was like. There is no
Okay.
such thing as justice, but
No, there
the
really isn't.
closest facsimile of justice there is, I guess, right?
It was the fact that every time something I wanted to do something good, I was traumatized, and I didn't know anything about how trauma can impact a person's life
Mm.
and the future generations coming up. I
Yeah,
didn't know that. I mean, imagine having your little kids in the car and you're so wound up inside that you don't know what to do, that you yell at your own children, duck, duck. It would be like a rehearsal, duck. I'd scream.
awful.
And I turn around and see the whatever kid who was sitting up still and didn't listen. I went, bam, you're dead. You need to follow instructions.
Right.
And it took decades for me to come to terms with that. I said, oh my God, I apologized to my kids, my grown kids. I said, I'm sorry. I said, I was a basket case. But in
Right.
my mind, I was trying to keep you alive, how to survive, how to follow instructions in a life and death situation.
Right.
So yeah, that kind of stays with you.
Yeah. What was it like writing the book? Was it cathartic? Did it help you work through your feelings? Did it
Some of it
reconnect?
did.
Yeah.
Some of it did, but I would regress. And all of a sudden I was back into hypervigilance, that
Right.
hypervigilant state. Look how I started to respond just even trying to discuss that one night. And
Yeah.
it's been over 40 years, you know.
Yeah. That'll never leave you, unfortunately. I mean, you
No,
can't
it
live
won't.
through something like
My
that.
grandson got punched by mistake
Right.
because he tried to sneak up on me and scare me. He went boo. He's 22. All right. He's
Right.
22 years old. This is Thanksgiving. He tries to scare me. I turn around. I come out swinging. He goes, Grandma, you gave me a bloody nose. I went, I'm sorry. So
Exactly.
yeah, it's still kind of, it stay like you said, it doesn't go away.
Yeah.
So okay, I
Tell
gotta calm down because I'm getting a little hyper about it.
it's hard. I mean, like I said, you talk about a trauma, the trauma comes back to you. It's hard to revisit this stuff. So I'm sure writing the book on one level was cathartic, but on the other hand, it brought it all back to you as well.
It did. And also, it did one thing. I was able to pinpoint some things that occurred in the family, our family history,
Hmm.
the guys who came back from World War II, okay, from Vietnam and World War II. I
Right.
realized I acted like them.
A little PTSD.
Yeah.
Yeah, or a lot of
I noticed
PTSD.
that. I said,
Yeah.
"Oh, this is really something to check into." And I lived with it with so many years. And it was God, back in, oh, I forget what year it was, but it was in the early 2000s that there was a doctor that said to me one day, he said, "Linda, you have PTSD." He
Right.
said, "You're having," and I had another doctor when I went to go discuss this with a therapist, and she noticed that when a subject matter come up, how I started to get up and getting ready to get out of the room. She goes, "You're having a panic attack." And I
Right.
said, "What?" I didn't know that I was actually having a panic attack, but she was asking me very uncomfortable questions. And right now I got my feet wrapped around the post here so I don't get up and move.
Right.
But
Right.
I was, all these things are telling me, no, this is real for you.
Right.
And it took a while for me to get over it because for, decades at 1:15, 1:16 in the morning, I'd wake up in the middle of the morning or the middle of the night and wake up and not realize I was stuck on that number because that's the time I was looking at the clock when I saw the lights going down the embankment.
Awful.
And once I figured that out, guess what? I can finally sleep past that time.
Right.
But it
Right.
was decades I was waking up.
Yeah, I don't blame you. You wake up to that kind of trauma, you never forget it. The book is called Sticks and Stones and Broken Bones, What a Charmed Life I Lead. It is written by Linda Lee King. It is wonderfully written. She's a journalist as well as a survivor of this awful ordeal that happened back in 1974 that has haunted her for decades ever since. It was her stand to get justice so her husband would be cleared, that her husband would be remembered, and that the people who had done wrong would pay a price. Linda Lee King, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
And I appreciate the moment here to discuss it with you. And I only have one little thing I'd like to add.
Absolutely.
Because of what happened to me, it shouldn't reflect on the good officers that are out there in the world. You know,
Absolutely.
it's just like any population. There's 2% of anywhere that somebody's going to be rotten.
Exactly, exactly. But those 2% can do a lot of harm, particularly when they're armed with guns, which is why, there needs to be checks and balances, and hopefully the system works better now than it did for you back in 1974. Linda Lee King, thank you so much for joining us here today. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.
Thank you.